which I'm looking forward to. Sorry if you don't have days off. Welcome to anybody watching this outside in the big wide world. Any residents, you're very welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join us. Hi, Tony Edwards, great to have you here too. My dog, listen, just please, you can drive me insane. I am tonight trying to dispense with paper. I always print out these important documents, but I just think that's a bit wasteful, and so I'm trying to dispense with it tonight. So please bear with me if I'm messing around with the iPad here on my left. Okay, I think we will start, mindful of the fact that Tony and Joel will join us, and that's absolutely fine. And it's lovely to see everyone. So apologies for absence. I have none other than those notifications of lateness. So if those could be noted, that would be great. I wonder if Joel's going to arrive in time for his declaration of interest. Simon or anybody, would they like to make a declaration of interest? This is the moment. Simon Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to remind you that I'm a council appointed remunerated non-executive director of HTS Property and Landscaping.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Carter or Simon. Minutes. I hope you've all had a chance to review the minutes and the reports from the Business and Economy, Community and HTS work streams. Any comments on the minutes? Are we happy to approve them? Simon, yes.
I'm happy to approve them, but I have a matter arising.
Okay, lovely. Okay, you've got a matter arising?
I'm happy to approve them, but I have a matter arising.
Okay. Is everybody else happy to approve them? And then we can move on to matters arising. Right, Simon Carter, matters arising. Over to you, first of all.
Thank you, Chair. It's item 31, outbreak prevention and planning. The final paragraph refers to utilising the community rangers to assist with social distancing. I have to say that the one-way system in Broadwalk has failed dismally. There are not enough signs up there. There's nobody about to actually guide anybody. I go along there now and again, and it's, you know, I can't say anything to anybody because there's no signs. Now, I noticed there's an item later on in the agenda, but I have to say this is a distinctive failure. And also, there's very little been done across the other shopping centres across the town. But also, whilst I have the floor, I did write to you a few weeks back, and one of the things I asked was how planning for Christmas was going, what your strategy was, you know, for carol concerts and lights and that kind of thing, because we need to be getting ready for it.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Simon, I do recall you writing to me about Christmas, and I haven't replied. So I'm going to suggest, Jane, do you want to come in on both those points? Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as the signage for the town centre and the one-way, there's new signage been ordered. That should be here soon. It's much bolder. It's more robust. Like I say, it's on order at the moment. As far as the marshals, if you want to call them that, Brian, has there been some work with that, with the town centre action plan? I think there has.
Yes, if I can come in, Chair. In relation to marshals, or as we'd rather call them, ambassadors or town hosts, if you remember, we got £46,000 from the government for marshals and similar. So Andrew Bramage and I have been discussing how we're going to use that money, and some of that money will be used to help people do the right thing in Broadwalk, etc. Also this week, I've had meetings with the managers of the Water Gardens and the Harvey Centre, and expressed, not concern, but encouraged them to do more, I think is probably the best way of putting it. And they both said they will, so I'm hoping to see good improvements there. So indeed, I saw the Water Gardens manager today, and she was going straight back there to make improvements and talk to the people who needed to do things. While I'm speaking, I'll touch on the Christmas piece as well. When I discussed Christmas with managers of Water Gardens and the Harvey Centre, they're both intending to do things for Christmas. It will be more in the case of streaming rather than people. So Santa probably won't be in the Harvey Centre, but they may well be somebody who looks very much like Santa on a screen. So things are happening, lights will be on, and you will have a Christmas feel, notwithstanding the restrictions that we're all currently in. I hope that helps.
And I can add to the Christmas lights. So we've met with the contractors today, so there will be lights in Broadwalk as well, as there normally is.
Excellent. Thank you much indeed. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for both those points. Mark Ingle, I think you had a matter arising. Oh, welcome, Councillor Charles.
Hello, Joel. Yes, thank you, Chair. In our last meeting, it was recommended that a letter was sent from the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Johnson, and myself to Essex County Council regarding protecting the elderly and vulnerable in care homes. And that letter was duly drafted and agreed on and sent by both Councillor Johnson and myself. And we received the letter, a reply from Essex County Council, which is part of the document pack that you should all have seen. And I think it's encouraging in many areas. I worry perhaps about the speed of return of tests that are done, but I think that's outside of Essex County Council's control.
Okay. Yeah, I thank you, Mark. Tony Edwards, Councillor Edwards.
Just pick up briefly on this. I'm a member of Essex Health Scrutiny Committee, and in that role, we met with Councillor Spence and with Mike Geraghty, where he went through the information that they'd previously given out to the leaders of the various groups, now various sort of councils. Now, one of the things that had concerned me, and also in relation to this particular letter, is the role of domiciliary care. And whilst it's quite right that we look to protect people that are in care homes and work needs to be done on that, actually the vast majority of elderly and vulnerable people who are being supported are actually being supported in their own homes via domiciliary care agencies. And the domiciliary care agencies who quite often will go from one person to another person to another person across the town, and quite frequently you'll also find people that sometimes have domiciliary care going in 3 or 4 times a day, and there may well be different people that are going in from from the same agency, but different people going in each time, as it were. So one of the questions that raised that came to my mind was that there's work being done in terms of making certain that there's testing for staff in care homes and trying to make that safe. But is there being any work done as far as domiciliary care agencies are concerned? And I raised that question specifically, and the response that I got was no, that there hadn't been any work done at present. Now, I suppose what I suppose my what I'm thinking is, if we go on to have further correspondence with the county or further discussions with the county, then I think we ought to be picking that up, and possibly in terms of ourselves, in terms of domiciliary care agencies within the town, it's an issue that we need to be aware of, and also sort of just being clear on what precautionary measures they're implementing and how they're managing the difficulties that they're facing. Just at all. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Councillor Ingle.
Yeah, can I suggest then that Councillor Johnson and myself write a follow-up letter thanking Essex for what they've said about care homes, and asking that they show the same diligence. We'll find a form of words that's agreeable to us both, I hope, around domiciliary staff, because Councillor Edwards is absolutely right. I live next door to Fountains Farm, 24 little bungalows, and lots of domiciliary staff are coming in, and often they are from agencies as well, so it's different people. So yeah, I think that's a good point, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Councillor Johnson, do you have a view on that?
always happy to write to Essex with Councillor Ingle on this issue. And yes, I do think we owe Councillor Spencer thank you for the letter that we got back from him, because I felt it was quite detailed, but I know we're going to come on to that later.
We are going to come on to that. You're absolutely right. And yes, I thought it was detailed and I thought it was swift. And I think that was very good. Okay, terrific. Any other matters arising? Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up the points that Councillor Edwards mentioned on domiciliary care, and Fountains Farm was given as an example where there's separate bungalows. In the case of Sumner's Farm Close, where it is one entrance into 40 plus different residents, and I have from personal experience of this, as you know, although there is aging care in there, when people are re-enabled from hospital, because bearing in mind, because of COVID, it's almost like a 2-hour discharge, they immediately put carers. We had carers from all over the shop, literally. And, you know, so I think maybe housing need to consider the number of different care companies going into their in that home in particular, even although they have their own established carers. So I just make that point because there are quite a few risks associated with that. And the other sad thing about the re-enablement is, although they might send someone in 4 times a day, our cameras showed that in a lot of times they were only there for 5 minutes or 6 minutes instead of 45 minutes. So it does worry me about lots of other people in the community that really aren't getting the support they should. So I'll just pass that on. Thank you.
Does anybody want to comment on that? I guess particularly the question of protocols of carers going into schemes? No? Okay. Well, Councillor Mason, I'm sure you will keep us all to task on that issue. Okay, in that case, I think that does it to matters arising. It's one of those awkward moments where I look at my matters arising. Now we move on to the substantial pieces of business. So I'm going to ask Andrew Bramage to give us an update on the COVID infection rates. Thank you for the paper you prepared, Andrew, and I suspect you might have even later information since that was circulated.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wasn't planning to go through the report. Hopefully members have had a chance to see that, and it's relatively self-explanatory, I think, in terms of the position, which was as of figures we had from Public Health England in the middle of last week, 14th of October. Since then, there's actually been a bit of disruption to the daily figures we were getting. Public Health England have revamped the way that they are providing information to local authority partners, and there was a period of a few days where we got no information, but that restarted yesterday. Unfortunately, the figures for Harlow have shown a continuing increase. The measure that's most often used nationally now for COVID infection rates is the rate of new infections per 100,000 of population. And you'll see many of the towns and cities in the north of England that are in tier 3 measures now are sometimes in the several hundreds of cases per 100,000. When this report was written, Harlow was at 54. As of the beginning of this week, Harlow is now at 69. There was a slight dip above 70, and then it's dipped back down to 67, and now as of yesterday up to 69. So the trend is still an upward one. And I think the other notable thing about the figures that we've seen this morning is that Harlow is now about on a par with the Essex average and also the East of England average, whereas for the last month or so we've been consistently below those figures, and we're now pretty much exactly on the average for both Essex and the East of England. So it's a continuing situation here. I think in terms of our neighbouring authorities, they continue to be higher than Harlow. actually quite significantly in some cases. So that they're showing also considerably increased rates of increase as well. So that's the latest position, but I particularly want to focus also on the sort of the measures that we've been taking to try and counteract that. Obviously, we're in a different situation now than we were at the last meeting, with Essex going into tier 2. So there's an extra set of restrictions that we're now implementing and advising businesses on how they should best deal with those. And in fact, this week, there's been a significant increase in the response from businesses requesting information, advice and guidance, which has actually been pleasing to see that businesses are taking it seriously and are proactively approaching us for that. So the team have been actually very busy this week on that. One of the other things that point 7 in the paper around the testing was something that actually came directly out of the data that we were getting from Public Health England, which was identifying that there was a falling number of tests being delivered in Harlow. Not that there was a shortage of capacity actually, but just fewer people were presenting themselves for tests. Which we sort of took to be probably because, from the middle of September, there was a lot of national publicity about the difficulty of people getting tests, and a lot of stories about people having to go hundreds of miles to the nearest test centre. And I suspect that put a lot of people off. And in fact, I know people who were put off who just decided not to bother because they didn't think they'd be able to get a test. That undoubtedly contributed, I think, to some of the lower figures we were seeing in September in Harlow. And as we said there, we were able to intervene and the testing capacity has doubled in Harlow now. Publicity has gone out around that. And actually, we've seen a consistent increase in the last 2 to 3 weeks of people getting tested each day in the town, which is good to see. And also the council's communications team have been very busy in the last few weeks on putting out the messages around the Public Health England campaign, and that's been a large part of the communications team work in recent weeks to promote that, to try and people to understand the issues. Clearly, we've now got another set of issues to deal with the tier 2 restrictions, and that will be a focus of work over the next few weeks. And as Brian said earlier, we are now going to be bringing on some what we call COVID ambassadors rather than marshals, but to do patrols in the town centre and the neighbourhood centres, and probably some of the hatches as well, in an advisory capacity rather than an enforcement capacity. Hopefully we don't have to move to that latter course of action. But that's sort of the latest position, Chair, where we are as of the beginning of this week.
Thank you, Andrew. That's very helpful. I think, one of the things that I noted from the reports, and you've just highlighted again, is, our figure per 100,000 requires, good testing data. And if there is more testing happening elsewhere and they're getting higher results, then, clearly we're not looking at like for like. And, I noticed that we've got double the testing capacity, but we don't seem to have double the tests. I think it went from 250 to 300 last week, whereas we'd had an extra 2 days, which I think is understandable, very likely for reasons you've said. And I have seen communications out there on social media and stuff saying that there is more capacity and encouraging people. So I hope that will pick up, because we don't want to get a false sense of security because we're not getting people stepping forward for testing and getting enough data. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Andrew? Councillor Charles. And welcome, Tony, Councillor Durkin.
Thanks, Chair. My first question is about cross-border collaboration. Clearly, people would have seen in the Hertfordshire press that they are still in tier 1, despite rumours that they were going to move. The public health chief in Hertfordshire said they're not far off from making a formal request. But what conversations, Brian, Andrew Bramage, have you had with councils like East Herts and Uttlesford around obviously Attlesford in our area, but with East Herts as well, around the challenges of, and I suppose anecdotally, I think that there are a number of people going into Hertfordshire which they shouldn't be, because Hollow's in a unique position on the boundary, the county boundary, to do activities in Hertfordshire, and how we're going to manage that if Hertfordshire still stays in Tier 1 into the next week, because I think that's a particular issue that we should show some cross-border collaboration on.
If I can answer that, Chair. I mean, I have regular conversations with Richard Custody, the Chief Executive of East Herts. He understands the different issues because they have higher positive rates than us, but we're in Tier 2, they're in Tier 1. I also have regular fortnightly meetings with the East of England Chief Executive, so not only obviously Hertfordshire, but Cambridge, which is also higher than us, and Norfolk and Suffolk, which are actually lower. So we're all trying to come together, but it is difficult when you have a neighbour with higher tests, positive tests than us, but we continue talking to try and ease it, but it's not easy.
One of the suggestions I had for this, because it's a particular issue for us, is I think that the police could help in terms of some form of work between constabularies around the border there and trying to educate the public whether or not Essex could consider putting up the temporary information VAS signs to warn people if you're making unnecessary journeys, you're breaking the rules of Tier 2 from coming from Essex into Hertfordshire. Some form of communication on the border. I know it's tricky, and I'm not in the business of adding extra expense, but I think a conversation needs to be had about cross-border communications and trying to educate the public. You can't do that if it's not a necessary journey. I just flag that as something that I think needs to be looked at.
I'll do that, Jill.
The second
Can I also
question,
just add?
Can I just ask if someone's shuffling something? There's some sort of quite a lot of noise. Is anyone shuffling some papers? No. Okay. Sorry. Was that you, Councillor Charles? We're going to continue.
Andrew, I think, wanted to come in, but I had two other questions.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, Councillor Johnson. I know you've got your hand up. Oh.
Just on that point, we also are having dialogue with the environmental health officers, particularly with East Hertfordshire as well, to discuss this issue, because we are also aware anecdotally that there's quite a lot of traffic at the moment between Harlow and Hertford and Bishop Stortford, it's incumbent upon the businesses in those locations to be doing their due diligence about bookings that they're taking. And that's a conversation that's going on. I suspect, though, that it will not be long before Hertfordshire is in the same position as us. Their numbers are considerably higher than Essex is anyway.
And the second question I had, Chair, was just around monitoring of our shopping hatches and where there is particular volumes of traffic and how we measure that, because we noticed in the first official lockdown that there was increasing numbers of people queuing in Bush Fair, Old Harlow and so on, and that queuing has restarted as the social distancing measures rightly have been ratcheted up by some of these supermarkets. What process can we do to monitor that, to see where there are volumes of traffic that just need a little extra monitoring just to make sure the social distancing is working? I know that we've got the rangers, but it might be helpful to report into this group where we're seeing pedestrian traffic at higher levels in the town more than others, and particularly the hatches may give an indication of that in the wider shopping precincts.
Yeah, and also we made much in Harlow Times of encouraging people to use the local shopping areas. So, and I think we actually said explicitly that we are keeping you safe. So I think it is beholden on us to manage that. So I think that's a point well made. Andrew Bramage, were you going to say something on that, or Jane? Or, I mean, I guess the ambassadors, I'm not sure about being a COVID ambassador, but the warden function is clearly part of that. But I guess maybe if we can expedite that,
Absolutely, that's absolutely that's the point I was going to make. That those people will be able to provide us with that intelligence, and we are fast tracking the recruitment of those people. We're actually going to work with the contractors that we've appointed for the fly tip and littering enforcement. Not that this is an enforcement function, but that organisation employs a lot of people who have backgrounds as local authority community safety officers, as PCSOs, so that they are the right sort of people to take on that interface function. So we're looking to get people in within the next week.
Then my third and final question, and that's really helpful, Andrew. And if we can get some form of information at the next meeting, I think all members would be interested to see that, the numbers and the footfall. My third question is just around the common strategy and how that's evolving. One of the ideas I had to throw into the melting pot that complements what I was saying around getting the community champions, which I know you've taken on board, is could we, to sort of inject a bit more creativity into our social media channels, do a takeover? So a voluntary sector group could take over our social media channels to promote certain messages around the COVID recovery. I think that would be quite fun to do that. It's a standard practice that lots of different sectors use, these sorts of takeovers where you're on 1 week or 1 day focusing on a central message around our response to the COVID pandemic. And I think that might be quite good fun to do that, and might engage more people in the comms that we're trying to put out there.
Simon, do you want to say anything about that? I think that sounds like an excellent suggestion.
I can take that back and talk to the officers about it.
And would also raise the profile of those groups and help us connect with their audiences. So yeah, great. Okay, Councillor Edwards and then Councillor Johnson.
So I've recently got there is now a government interactive map which enables you to get right down to almost up ward level. And what's quite interesting is, so you can now see, if you go in on that, what the layest figures are over the last week, etc. And so, for example, you can compare Church Langley, or you can compare Bush Fair, or you can compare. And it's what's become, and if you look on that map, you will see there's quite a variation across the town in terms of where cases are occurring, as it were. So I think, I mean, if that pattern continues, and given that some of those areas where the weather are higher, there are indeed shopping centres or shopping precincts within those particular areas, as it were. If that pattern continues, it may well be worth your while. We may well need to think about, well, okay, how we can target stuff at times right down to a sort of almost like a granular level, whether at a shopping centre level or whatever, but be informed by those by the figures. Okay. I can let you have the email link for that if anybody needs it. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to pop it in the chat, if you can do that, Tony, or share it, that would be great.
I'll try and do that. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you for that, Chair. And yeah, thanks for the report, Andrew, and the most up-to-date information. I've got a few questions. First is, I appear in the copy that I've got on my iPad to have item 4 on the agenda and item 5 on the agenda to be exactly the same things. Am I missing something, or was that just a typo? Was I meant to have something else in a different draft?
Maybe you have a different. I'm looking at my one on my iPad, and it's fine. Item 4 is matters arising. Item 5 is update on COVID infection. So,
sorry, Chair. Within the report itself, paragraph 4 and paragraph 5 of the report.
Oh, I think they're duplicated. I noticed that as well. I think those 2 points are just written twice.
So that's just a typo. I'm not missing anything.
No, I didn't think so.
My second question is around the very concerning. Well, I suppose it's good if it's true, but I'm concerned it's not true, and that's the rate that Harlow is running at the moment for infections. And obviously, Brian's had some similar concerns that are detailed further in the report. do we have any idea why Harlow is showing such a dramatically lower rate to the rest of Essex, although acknowledging that it's climbing considerably and at a fast rate? Have we got any idea why it's so much lower?
I must admit that's puzzled me as well, because you look across the country and sort of urban areas tend to be the places where there are the higher rates. So you might have expected that to be the case in Harlow, but it's not. We've consistently had lower rates than the neighbouring authorities, you know, particularly Epping Forest and Uttlesford, which are obviously a lot more rural. And East Hertfordshire for that matter. So it is odd, I agree, but these are the figures that we're provided with Public Health England, which are based on postcode data of the positive tests. So you know, we can do nothing but rely on that data, I think. But I agree, it seems odd.
Do you not,
Chair.
Andrew, do you not think this point about testing being low, you know, if we're not getting people testing, we're not going to get, you know, the figures high enough?
Indeed,
I think
part of my third question.
Yeah, can I
I
come
think
in?
that's part of it, yeah.
Sorry, have you got something to say on that point, Councillor Ingle?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Councillor Johnson, this is a question that's exercised us in the COVID local outbreak group that I sit on with other Essex leaders. And although we have no empirical evidence to suggest that, we think it may have something to do with the way people travel to work. And so, for example, a lot of people from Epping travelling to work on the tube. I'm wondering whether it's something to do with that. Also, it could have something to do with the fact that Harlow has a very high proportion of workers that have been furloughed for some time. 1/3 of our workers have been furloughed. And if they've been furloughed, they've not been travelling to work at all. So although it's just postulation, we feel that it may have something to do with patterns of work.
Very interesting. Councillor Johnson, you've got another question, I think.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and that answer from Councillor Ingle as well is particularly helpful, because that was the supposition that I came to. What I was hoping it wasn't was that people were maybe not getting tested when they had it, for fear of then having to isolate and things like that. And I wonder if my third question bears that out around the level of testing. Have we done? We're now up to 300 per week. That's 300 per 100,000, as I understand the report.
That's right, yeah.
How does that compare to the other authorities that are quoted above with the higher infection rates? Do they have a higher percentage of people per 100,000 presenting for tests, or are we in line with their percentages?
I happen to have the figures on the screen. As of yesterday, Harlow's figure was 311 per 100,000. Epping Forest was 330, Uttlesford 303.
Wow.
So
that's really encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah, and there are actually quite a few authorities in Essex with lower testing rates than Harlow. Basildon, Castle Point, Chelmsford are all lower than Harlow's figure at the moment.
So that's really, really encouraging if we're in the middle of the pack for testing.
Yeah.
And still showing lower rates. That would suggest to me that actually, although we highlight the bad things about people not wearing masks in certain areas and certain public houses and all the rest of it, that actually it would suggest the majority of the population of Harlow are paying very close attention to the government's advice around hand, space and space.
Just feedback quickly, actually, on the environmental health team did a series of visits on Saturday evening around a number of pubs and restaurants in the town, just to check what was happening, and actually pretty much universally there was compliance with the processes. There was no significant issues spotted anywhere.
It's really wonderful. I mean, I'm always very keen to celebrate the positive, in the belief that, you know, it encourages more positive. I know the opposite is it would encourage complacency. So I do get that. But, you know, I instinctively want to, you know, I guess we can say, hand on heart, the people of Harlow are doing a good job. And it's not just lip speak, it's actually the truth. But I think it's really important that people get a sense that their efforts are being valued. You know, one of my closest friends and neighbours is the runs the cafe in Newhall, and they're going to such lengths. And I think, were they to know that their small part was contributing to a really good result for Harlow, it would be really heartening. But I don't quite know how one communicates that, or if one does. But it raises the question in my mind in any case. Andrew Bramage, I just want to put in here, I had a brief conversation with you about if and how we might look to support the Harlow hospitality sector, potentially with some sort of potentially funds from our budget towards outdoor seating, so they can extend their capacity somewhat. I mean, I know this isn't really the time to talk about it, but just wanted to say I'm very keen on that idea.
Just quickly, that will go to the Business and Economy Workstream meeting for discussion. But of course, today there's been the announcement from the government that there is now grant support to businesses in the hospitality sector in tier 2 regions. So I think it's £2,100 per month.
Yeah.
So that will provide some support for those businesses.
Great. Okay, terrific. Councillor Ingle, did you have your hand up, or was it earlier on? You're on mute.
No, that was earlier on, and it's been dealt with. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, sorry. Okay, thanks.
That's all right.
You have a T-shirt. You're on mute. Okay. Anything else to talk about from Andrew's report, or anything we talked about? I found that very useful. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to the next item, which I believe is the funding allocation recovery budgets. You know, we didn't agree a process essentially for how we will allocate this money, and we don't want a pot of money sitting there not used. And there were plenty of really good ideas in the work stream plan that, you know, I really want to see start coming forward. And I've heard, you know, there's a couple in the ether, well, there are a couple that people have mentioned to me that I really think do bear consideration. So working with Simon and Brian, we've come up with the process that I'll ask Simon Hill, I think. Will you just talk us through? Again, I presume people have read it and it's pretty self-explanatory. Perhaps it's just a case of questions, but just want to make sure everyone's happy with that.
Yeah, you've stolen most of what I was going to say. So yeah, I mean, the council's allocated this money, and what we want to have is a consistent operation of how we handle bids for that money across the 4 different work streams. What we're proposing is a fairly straight methodology where I'll go to the work stream. They will consider it against some criteria that I've drafted, which are consistent with our tried and trusted grant aid criteria for those types of grants, and then it will go to a funding decision that will take into account the views of members at that decision-making point. What we wanted to do was have something that was agile enough to allow quick allocation of funds if and when it was needed. The only other recommendation is about directly asking the Cabinet just to formally allow lead officers to take those funding decisions as a mechanism. I'm quite happy to answer any questions on the report.
Okay, thank you, Simon. I just want to begin by raising one myself, which is someone asked me, you know, do we need to have any minimum cap on bid? Do we need to specify within there, you know, the amounts that we would look at? And my response, and I'm just looking for clarification, was that given 150,000 is not a large amount of money and we want it to work as hard as possible, I think we will be looking at bids, you know, in the sort of vicinity of 7.5 to 15 at the top end. That was sort of in my mind, but I don't know if we need to specify that or if people have views on that. But I know that's something that was raised with me. Yes, Simon Hill.
The only thing I would say, if it was an external provider, we'd need to be very mindful of our contract rules going down the line. Once you get above a certain threshold, we would need to consider about best value and those types of things in allocating contracts. But other than that, I don't think there's a specified minimum.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mason, I think you have your hand up. And
thank you, Chair. I was thinking along the line of the limits. So from reading this, if there is 150,000 and HTS requests will go via HTS, in theory, that's 150,000 across the 3 work streams. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And I think the other thing to say is we must always look for where the money could come from somewhere else. So, you know, and is there money that we're not spending that we could deploy? So we must, you know, be really creative in making sure this money goes as far as it possibly can.
Thank you.
Simon, did you want to add anything to that? I've seen you, Simon Carter. Yep.
No, Chair, that was probably similar to what I was going to say.
Gee, we've done well tonight, Simon. Simon Carter and then Mark Ingle. Oh, you don't want to talk, Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Just a detail on the proposed allocation criteria. I'm been around long enough to remember the old grant bids that we used to do. So it's just a detail thing, but one of the things we used to ask for was a copy of their constitution. Now, whether you were assuming that would be covered under the audited accounts, I don't know, but we will be looking at some of the smaller groups, but presumably you'll be looking to some of the large organisations. And just for Councillor Mason, my reading of these notes was HTS would be funding its own projects.
Sorry, if I may, Chair. I mean, I think it needs to be looked at in the light of operational requirements, because if you're only dishing out small amounts of money, the amount of due diligence is different than you are if you're allocating large amounts of money. So I think we'd have to see about how and what comes forward. I think for me, it's more important that it has an alignment to our strategic requirements, rather than seeking money from a particular element of the community. It has to align to what we're trying to achieve. And Councillor Carter's right, the HTS one, on the stuff that comes out of the HTS work stream, we are anticipating that HTS would self-fund those if it would require further investment.
Thank you. Councillor Ingle, I think I was mistaken and you didn't have your hand up. No. Great. So Councillor Edwards, I'll come to you. And I should say Tony has put the link in the chat to the staging data. You want to have a look in there and copy in that.
In terms of the in terms of the process of putting forward a bid, are they councillor nominated bids, as it were, or is it just open to any organisation to come forward with a proposal, or
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, they would need to be sponsored by a member or an officer, and they will need to be in line with the activities within the work plan and the objectives of the group. But no, we're not opening this to bids from outside the council, unless I'm misunderstood.
So there would be councillors, for want of a better word, sponsored. So if an individual councillor has an idea,
or officer,
they go to the group. Fine, it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'm looking for hands. I don't think I see any. Okay, are we happy to? I presume we need to agree this. Is that the intention? Oh no, I've got Tony. Do we need to agree this? Am I right, or is it just for noting?
I think you just need to formally approve it.
Okay. Well, if anyone, is everyone happy to approve it? Maybe raise your hand if you're not. Mark, are you happy to approve it? Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, I got into I was putting my hand up before I heard the not.
That was probably my mistake, sorry. Okay, we're now going to move on to an item that we actually touched on in the earlier in the meeting, and that is letter to responses from Councillor John Spence, written by Andrew Johnson and Mark Ingle shortly after our last meeting, and the letter and the reply are attached, and I thought it was very good that we got the letter off quite quickly, and very good that he responded very fully. I think there was a lot of detail in both. And does anybody have any comments? Or in fact, Brian, I think, did you want to introduce this item and say a few words?
Yeah, I think it says it all in the letters. I mean, as you say, we got the letters out quickly to John Spence. John Spence has done a full reply. We had a discussion earlier, and Councillor Tony Edwards did make some points that we may wish to go back to Councillor Spence on. But I think we just want to keep the dialogue up with the County Council. It's one of those cases where we do need to keep talking to them. If we have concerns, we need to bring them probably to Councillor Spence. If he's obviously willing to communicate, so let's keep up that dialogue.
Okay, so can an action, are we agreed that an action from this meeting is a follow-up letter from Mark and Andrew, thanking him for his response and raising the point that Tony Edwards raised with us earlier on, which I think is really vital. But I think we also need to take that issue internally. I was going to say this, just wanted to say that obviously we have a relationship with the care providers. I know this from work we have tried to do to improve the way they leave some of the premises. We've had massive problems with rubbish and food and McDonald's stuff just left outside people's homes. Really, really quite unbelievable on occasion. And I know it's quite a difficult group to communicate with. And I think we probably do need to apply the multi-pronged attack. And so I would also like, as an action from this meeting for us, I know through housing, I believe that we can write to, or Lisa, actually, I think you, Lisa, thought you normally write the letters when we've had this issue. Am I right? Or maybe it's given to you as a task, but one way or another, I think we should do it as well. But also the letter to Councillor Spence would be good. Is it Spence? That's my mother's maiden name. John Spence, my uncle's name. Okay, anything further to say on that point? No? Okay, well, that brings us to matters of urgent business. Councillor Johnson.
Apology.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to inform you that Councillor Johnson has his hand up.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, Chair, I was using the formal.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lisa's been messaging me, and she did message me. It's my bad.
No problem. I have two questions about it, and to say, yeah, totally agree. Happy to write back. I was very happy with the response that John gave us, but he did say in that if we had any further queries, feel free to get in contact with him, and I think we should take him up on that. And happy to be part of that. There were two questions from me. The first was he talked about there being an additional funding stream made available earlier in the year to care homes, and I wondered if we have any details of how many care homes in Harlow took advantage of that additional funding stream, and indeed if there were any care homes that didn't take advantage of that additional funding stream. And my second question is, we talked in the letter that Councillor England and I wrote about weekly briefings, and Councillor Spence says that there is a environmental health officer from Harlow who should be sitting on weekly briefings and passing those on to us. I'm not aware of seeing those briefings, so can we know who that is that sits on the briefing body on Harlow Council's behalf, and can we get hold of copies of those briefings every week, please?
Brian, Andrew.
Yes, I believe it's either Sally Haggerson or Nora Nolan sit on the weekly meetings with colleagues across Essex. I'll check to see if we actually get any written reports, and if we do, then yes, they can be circulated.
Great.
Yeah.
And can we also, just before you come in, can we also, as an action, find out about if local care homes? Yeah, we can take that as an action. Yeah. Yes, Councillor Johnson.
Chair, with respect, we felt it so important that Councillor England and I asked for those weekly briefings in the letter that we wrote. Even if we're not getting written briefings via that body, I think our own staff should be briefing us, and it was important enough for Mark and I that we asked for it. I think regardless of whether there's a written brief, we should be getting something back from our staff weekly on this.
Okay, I can see Andrew Bramage nodding,
Yep,
so
fine.
I'll presume that's going to happen. Great.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you both, and thank you. This is what this forum, I think, is at its best when it's doing. So that's terrific. Thank you. Okay, does anybody else have anything else they would like to raise at this point? I want to just say, Andrew Bramage, we have the breakfast meeting with the Chamber of Commerce on the, am I right in saying the 30th of November?
13th.
13th, spooky
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th. We would be delighted to have anybody there who'd like to attend. We will be talking about the Apprentice Scheme. Tony Durkin, would be great if you were able to be there. I'm really hoping, Andrew, that we're going to see a bid from you and Tony for some money to put in some resource to support that scheme. I had the most fantastic call from a local business this week, having read something in the Harlow Times, and she has 4 placements that she wants to, never done it before, but wants to do her bit, you know, and just so exciting to have people coming forward with that, but looking for support and not sure how to do it. So that's really promising. So I just wanted to let people know about that. And similarly, Discover Harlow Breakfast will also have a business recovery focus. And want to just feedback Simon Hill, please, to Neil Churchill, that I thought the Harlow Times was really great and he worked really hard on it, and I thought it was full of information, and we'll do follow-up information in December edition. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you very much for making time tonight. Wish you all the very best for the weekend and look forward to seeing you in a month. Good night.